Hey everyone, welcome back to OT Rex. I hope you guys are doing well. Today I decided to put together a quick overview about executive functioning. I find this topic really interesting because it impacts all of us, no matter what age group you're working with, and just reflecting on your own executive functioning skills can be really handy in understanding our ability to utilize our mental processes. So, this is such an interesting topic to me. I've been researching it more and more recently, working with some of my older kids with autism. Several of them really struggle with self regulation and executive functioning. They are very closely linked together, which is why I put little links there and put bubbles around both of them. And a lot of the times when you're working with kids who have poor executive functioning skills, you see decreased emotional regulation. They have very low frustration tolerance to novel or challenging tasks that are presented to them. And you might see more unwanted behaviors, such as maybe lashing out, getting angry, getting frustrated, hitting, so many things just because they don't have strong skill sets in executive functioning to help them work through something that's challenging. So, this is such a cool topic, and I hope you guys can self reflect because I have been doing a lot of reflecting on my ability to properly work through some of these things that are all related to executive functioning. So, I learned a lot about myself in the process. So, executive functioning are mental processes that help us plan, help us focus, it helps us with sequencing multi step activities, and also helps with time management. It's related to three brain functions that I wrote on the right side, which is working memory, mental flexibility, and self control. So, right off the bat, when I read these things, I think of a million different examples of how this applies to my life and to the kids that I work with. So, this skill, executive functioning, is not something we're born with. It is something that we learn through scaffolding. So we have to be exposed to uh, really just a lot of different ways of problem solving and how to work through these kinds of experiences in order to gain stronger executive functioning skills. You can work on these skills with children from a very young age, and as they get older, they learn how to adapt and really work through different challenges differently depending on the type of exposure and support they've received throughout that process. So, obviously, if you have a child who is in a situation with verbal abuse or any kind of abuse and other difficulties within the household, executive functioning can also really take a hit because they're not going to be in a just well supportive environment to pick up on these skill sets. There are a lot of charts and like these flow charts that I like on the internet. So here is one that kind of breaks down executive functioning challenges, and the top half says activation. So it's kind of like initiating. So we're organizing, prioritizing, and activating to work. Then it leads to action, which is like monitoring and self regulating those actions, which leads to memory. Memory is utilizing working memory and accessing recall, remembering things. And then it continues with emotion. So, managing our feelings, our frustrations, and modulating those emotions. So, how do we carry through when something gets really frustrating or hard? And then there's effort, regulating alertness, sustained effort, and speed at which we're going. And then focusing and sustaining, or even shifting your attention to tasks. So I think that this picture really does a nice job encompassing a lot of these different areas of executive functioning, but it also really shows you how many elements there are to getting something done. And it's not just starting the task to ending the task, it's planning and thinking about the task, starting the task, and then getting through the whole process up till completion. So there are a lot of steps in between that use executive functioning skills. I found this awesome free executive skills questionnaire that was created by Peg Dawson and Richard Guare. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. But this is an awesome resource that really breaks down executive functioning into all the separate categories and shows you strategies in addressing all of them individually. I'm not going to show you the entire packet on here, but I'm going to link the PDF in the description box. It starts off with a very simple 2-page questionnaire that follows a Likert scale, and it helps you break down all of the areas of executive functioning and which areas are your strengths and which areas are your weaknesses. So this was very enlightening for me to fill out, just to kind of self-reflect, and it was super helpful in understanding what skill sets that I excel in and what areas I really struggle in. So this should be helpful when you're working with your patients. You can have parents fill this out about their children. You can have adults fill this out with you together and have a session where you can self-reflect and plan to work towards some of these goals. Okay, so now that we've covered that information, I kind of did a little summary of ways to support executive functioning on the left. Executive functioning is very broad. There are so many different categories, as you might have noticed on the worksheets that we just looked at. So this isn't going to cover everything, but it will kind of give you some guidance on what executive functioning strategies would entail. So we can always help adapt the environment by decreasing distractions. We can use schedules or alarms, apps that help you with like reminders, such as like habit trackers. And along the similar line, planners and calendars work very well as well. And this concept of kind of putting some of the activities and things that we need to remember onto a different platform is called offloading. So we're giving ourselves less work and things to remember by using other things in our environment and other strategies to help us remember to do all these things effectively. So another thing is to normalize errors. I absolutely love this bullet because something that I work with all of my kids across the board is constantly telling them that it is no big deal when they make mistakes. So a lot of kids are really hard on themselves, and if emotional regulation is really hard for them and they get frustrated very easily, a lot of the times it has to do with like wanting to be perfect or just having a hard time wrapping their head around being bad at something for the first time. So a lot of the strategies that I use and I coach parents to use is about mindfulness, but also flexible thinking. So we're changing the way that kids think by giving them a better language to explain what they're learning and going through. So rather than I can't do this, it's I can't do it yet. And this, instead of getting angry and yelling, it could be this is hard. I'm going to try again. And a lot of it is coaching and encouragement. And I don't think that we, just as a society, really recognize how simple that is to coach, because it doesn't feel normal for us to be like, wow, this is really hard. It's hard because of this and it makes me feel this way, but I really should try again. Rather, like I think, just hide in a lot of a sense of shame and frustration and give up. And a lot of people won't question that, especially in their kids, if you're busy with work or not able to sit with them to see how they're working through something. So it's very important to be encouraging and to readily be available to help. So it's one thing to have a child be sitting down and doing something on their own, but if you're actively like working on it with them, you have so many opportunities to coach them on executive functioning skills. So you could point out with them like, oh, that step was tricky, huh? That was hard. Well, why don't we try it this way, or let's try it again? I can help you. So instead of the child giving up entirely, you made this opportunity to learn how to do it with them together and for them to feel a sense of success. And feeling a sense of success is such a wonderful feeling. Like, you guys just think of when you learned something or you mastered something for the first time and how great that feels. So even if you get help and you're able to do that, it builds a sense of confidence to prepare yourself to do it again, and that frustration tolerance gets higher and higher. So these little moments are really crucial, in my opinion, to developing strong self-confidence and willpower and executive functioning. If you guys work with kids, the Big Life Journal and Growth Mindset are really great scientific strategies and resources to look into. So there's this idea between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And if you have a fixed mindset, you're constantly saying things like, I can't do it, I don't like to be challenged, when I'm frustrated, I give up, feedback and criticism are taken personally, and basically, this person is, I stick to what I know. But if we have a growth mindset and this is taught to us and really, really implemented into our lives, then challenges help me grow. I can learn to do anything I want. Feedback is constructive. I like to try new things. And that's what I want to see with the kids that I work with. And oftentimes they have very, very rigid thinking and fixed mindsets. So we have to teach them to have a growth mindset. And this is good for us to remember for ourselves as well. I also really like this simple but effective handout for executive functioning needs. It has simple strategies that are very parent friendly. It's from the pathway to success.com, and it makes a really great handout that you can just print and hang on a wall. Another thing that we can do to adapt the activity and just a general approach is to make the steps very, very clear. So oftentimes, at least from my perspective working in pediatrics, most of my kids have speech difficulties as well. They have speech delay, comprehension delay. So when you think of a child receiving like a 3-step activity, we have to make sure that those steps are very clear. And by doing that, it makes the activity much more approachable. Let's think about when you get really mixed directions or you're not exactly sure what you're supposed to do, and that just makes you feel really insecure and you're not really sure how to complete the task because you don't really understand the task. So we want to make sure that these steps are very, very clear. If it is like a routine, let's say like getting ready in the morning, you can have a step-by-step list, make it really clean with pictures. So these are kind of obviously more geared towards peds, but you can always adapt any of these strategies when you're working with older adults, especially if their cognition has been impacted from an injury. Those stroke patients, I think a lot of this comes into play too when you're thinking about how they're going to get back to their ADL and IADL. So you can just adapt it as you go. This concept that we're kind of starting to talk about is a close-ended task. So we want to use something that is close-ended rather than open-ended. So when you think of an essay prompt and it's an open-ended answer, the sky is the limit. You can go in any direction you want, and that can be extremely overwhelming. But if you have a close-ended task, that means that the end result is the same and it's going to be very, very clear. So how you direct the person that you're working with, and even when you're thinking about tasks for yourself, if you make your goal close-ended, it's much more clear and tangible than when something is very loosey-goosey, open-ended, and unclear. Of course, the last bullet that I included is self-reflection. So discussing progress is a big part of our my words, metacognition. So it has to do with self-awareness, and it's asking things like, how did I do? What could I have done better? What could I have changed? It's just a lot of those kind of self-reflective questions that help you improve, and having those discussions with people you are working with on executive functioning can really be enlightening for them to have a chance to reflect. And if you go over some of these questions with your patient and they're really struggling to kind of come up with answers and self-reflect, then you know that metacognition is an area of need. And that makes it much harder to move forward in developing stronger executive functioning skills, because if you're not quite aware of what you're doing that you feel is good versus this needs work, then how are you supposed to move forward in making these skills stronger, making your routines and habits better. You really can. So this is such an interesting topic to me. I hope that this was insightful for you guys. I feel like it applies to everyone, and at any point in your lives, you can look at this and think about what routines and habits in your life can be better organized and more effective to your lifestyle. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.